GoForThe2.com. I'm into the Week 13 predictions for the college football season. Had a very solid week number 12. Turned my sights to this coming weekend. Should be a very intriguing weekend, to say the least. Great games starting on Thursday night all the way through Saturday night. Playoff implications are on the line. But for me, predictions this week are going to be very SEC heavy. For me, it starts on Friday afternoon. Missouri and Arkansas will be Gary Pinkel's last game as head coach for the Tigers. Missouri dropped a 19-8 game at home against Tennessee. They now go on the road to Fayetteville to face the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas coming off an emotional 51-50 loss to Mississippi State and Dak Prescott. They had the lead by 12 points early in the third quarter. They let it slip away. Dak Prescott put up over 500 yards of passing offense on that secondary, and they did get the 1-point victory over the Razorbacks. I did like Mississippi State last week for their ability to stretch Arkansas's defense vertically. They did that in that matchup. They stepped up and played very well. Now Missouri comes to town. It is Gary Pinkel's last game as head coach. I expect the team to be emotionally in this game. I like Missouri's defense, the way they match up on the defensive side of the ball, going up against Brandon Allen and the offense. When you look at Arkansas overall, they like to run the football with Alex Collins, but Missouri's rush defense, very solid in run support, only giving up about 125 rushing yards per game. They can create sacks. They have 26 on the year and are only giving up 15 points per game in terms of scoring defense. Offense has been the issue for Missouri. Drew Lock, freshman quarterback, hasn't really progressed in the system, but I expect an emotional effort out of the defense on the road. Not sure where Arkansas is emotionally in this game, and I expect Missouri to be in this game from start to finish. In the end, I do think Arkansas gets a 3-point victory, but I think Missouri makes this game very, very close because of the emotional factor with their coach and their ability to run the football. They're only averaging about 117 rushing yards per game, but they're going to want to run the football to take the pressure off of Drew Lock. That might open up the play-action passing attack a little bit later in the game, and I really think that Gary Pinkel opens up the playbook. His last game as head coach. Expect fireworks in Fayetteville this coming Friday. The game is a Friday. Keep that in mind. We're going to turn our attention to Saturday now. Intriguing battle, Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has dropped 8 of the last 9, coming off an emotional 38-21 loss in Miami last week. They led that game early, let the lead slip away. Once Georgia Tech falls behind, they do not have the ability this year to come from behind with a passing attack. They're only averaging about 125 passing yards per game. You look at Georgia right now. They're 8-3, coming off a disappointing home victory to Georgia Southern in overtime, 23-17. Very lackluster effort, but this is a rivalry game. Also, keep in mind, Georgia Southern likes to run the option. They're a heavy run option attack that it was averaging 378 rushing yards per game heading into that matchup against Athens. Well, Georgia Tech is a triple option attack. I think the week in preparation will benefit Georgia having already played the triple option attack. I think this defense will be ready. They're only giving up around 130 rushing yards per game. Solid defensive effort. And when I look at Georgia overall, I think their secondary matches up very well against Justin Thomas in this game. Georgia only giving up about 151 passing yards per game. Georgia has been really walking through the motions this whole season. They did not get up for their earlier rivalry game against Florida. They allowed Florida to run for 258 total yards of rushing offense. I expect an emotional effort out of the Bulldogs against Georgia Tech. They will be emotionally ready. You will see Georgia open up the playbook and put the pressure on the Yellow Jackets. And I think Grayson Lambert, quarterbacks really break out this coming weekend, and I think Georgia dominates this game in a big, big way. I think they beat Georgia Tech by at least 20 points on the road in Atlanta. Don't think the crowd will be up and into this game in terms of a sellout. Probably have more Georgia Bulldog fans than Yellow Jacket fans in this game, and I think Georgia routs Georgia Tech this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle in the SEC, LSU and Texas A&M. It's a Saturday night start. LSU coming off 3 straight losses. Texas A&M coming off an impressive 25 0 victory over Vanderbilt. I did pick Texas A&M last week. Thought the speed of A&M would be the difference against a slow Vanderbilt defense. I was right. Once they jumped out early, put the pressure on the Commodores, they never looked back in that matchup. Now they go on the road to Death Valley, where it's going to be a very difficult environment. I know LSU hasn't been playing well. They've dropped 3 straight games, but it's supposedly Les Miles' last game as head coach. And LSU matches up very well offensively going up against that defense in Texas A&M. Texas A&M giving up 202 rushing yards per game. When you beat Texas A&M, Myles Garrett, a speed rusher, you have to run off tackle. He likes to get up the field. Arkansas earlier in the year really pounded the football between the A and B gaps inside the Texas A&M defense. So did Alabama. Well, LSU is built the same way. They're a pro-style attack, I-back formation with a fullback that's going to pound that Texas A&M defensive front. I really don't think that LSU throws the football in this matchup. I think they run it with Leonard Fournette. I think Fournette gets back on track. He did have 108 rushing yards last week on the road in the loss to Ole Miss. And keep in mind, John Chavis is now the defensive coordinator of A&M. He was the former LSU D coordinator last year under Les Miles. Is there some bad blood there? Not sure, but I like LSU in this matchup at home. Think they dominate this game. Think it's by 2 touchdowns. I think LSU gets a convincing victory. I think it's up there too. I think it's 35-21 over Texas A&M. Not sold on the finesse team in the Aggies on the road. Still a tough environment, Death Valley. Place will be rocking Saturday night. Look for a dominating effort out of the Tigers this coming Saturday. The Swamp is going to be rocking as well. 10-1 Florida takes on arch rival Florida State. All eyes are on this Florida team right now. A lot of injuries, so keep that in mind. There are a lot of injuries in this matchup, but I still like the Gators. Defensive end, McAllister, and defensive tackle Bullard will not play. They're very banged up defensively, but I don't care. I think that Florida finds a way to get this game done and beat Florida State. You look at this Florida State defense in the last 5 games, they're allowing 178 rushing yards per game. Florida's going to want to run the football with Kelvin Taylor. They're going to want to pound it between the tackles, a conservative approach, and look for Florida to really stuff the running lanes of Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, a breakaway threat, but has problems pounding the ball inside against physical defensive fronts. He struggled in the 4th quarter against Clemson in that matchup, could not get a critical 4th down conversion on a 4th and 2. They ran a toss sweep. Dalvin Cook was stuffed. Well, even though Florida doesn't have players in there, Bullard and McAllister, I still think Kirk Morrison, and I like the secondary of Vernon Hargraves matching up with the Florida State offense. I think they have the ability to make Florida State one-dimensional. Florida only giving up 108 rushing yards per game. They have 36 sacks on the year. They're plus 10 in turnover margin. I think they find a way to get it done. They've been walking through the motions since that dominating rivalry victory over Georgia. They've had a lackluster effort against Vanderbilt, a lackluster effort against South Carolina, and got pushed to the limit last week against Florida Atlantic, but found a way to win 20-14. I think the defense finds a way at home to get the victory. This is a team that is in a playoff possible run here. They still have to go to the SEC championship game to face Alabama, so keep that in mind. Florida's in a position to possibly make the playoffs. So this is a team that should be focused, should be ready. And keep in mind, in their big games this year, Florida has found a way to get it done and step up and play emotional football. Florida knocked off Tennessee in a rivalry game. They stepped up at home against Ole Miss and dominated the Rebels 38-10. And they stepped up in a rivalry game against Georgia and dominated that matchup. So I like the way this team is playing. I know they haven't been playing well offensively, but I think they pound the football at the Seminoles, and I think they do find a way to get a 7-point victory. I think it's low scoring. I think it's 27-20. Florida gets the victory over Florida State this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup taking place, Stanford and Notre Dame. Stanford right now, Coming off a very impressive victory over Cal, Notre Dame had a struggle to get that victory in Fenway Park, 19-16 over Boston College. I said Boston College would lose that game 17-13 because that was their bowl game. Well, they forced 5 turnovers by Notre Dame, very solid in run support, and they got beat up on the offensive and defensive lines by a physical Boston College team. CJ Prosise might not play in this game. He's banged up. He left that game last week, and now they have to go on the road to a cross-country trip to the state of California to face another blue-collar team in the Stanford Cardinal. I think that's the difference for me. The cross-country trip for Notre Dame, coming off a very blue-collar game against a physical Boston College team. I like the way Kevin Hogan and the offense match up. I like the way the defensive front matches up against Notre Dame's offensive line, and I think Stanford does get a convincing 13-point victory at home in Palo Alto. I'm not sold on this Notre Dame team. I think the Cardinal can create some mismatch problems. I look for McCaffrey to have a big afternoon. Look for him to be utilized in the short to intermediate passing game, utilized on screen passes to neutralize that Notre Dame defensive front. And I think Stanford does get a convincing 13-point victory over Notre Dame this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup in the Pac-12. Arizona State on the road against California. California couldn't get it done last week against arch rival and rivalry game Stanford, but now they come back home to face Arizona State. Arizona State knocked off Arizona last week. They dominated, got a 15-point victory over the Wildcats. They now go on the road to face the Cal Bears. This is a Cal Bear team that right now is giving up 204 rushing yards per game. Arizona State's pounding the football, rushing for 184 yards per game. And this Arizona State defense is very solid. They have 44 sacks on the year. That's a top 5 defense in terms of sacks. That's a tied for first in FBS in total sacks. So their ability to get a pass rush on Jared Goff can be the difference in this matchup. And they're very solid in run support, only giving up 123 rushing yards per game. I look for Arizona State to run the football, keep Jared Goff off the field, and more importantly, get pressure on him to force short to intermediate throws. Berkovici, senior quarterback, has leadership. Their running back, Demario Richard, might not play, but I don't think it's a difference like the way the offensive line is playing for the Sun Devils. And I do think they get the road victory this coming weekend over the Cal Bears. I think it's high scoring. I think it's 44-37 over Cal this coming weekend. Arizona State gets the victory. Another intriguing matchup, going to go off the beaten path a little bit, is Southern Miss on the road against La Tech. The Southern Miss offense is explosive, averaging over 300 passing yards per game. They're rushing for right around 156 yards per game, but their defense very underrated, only giving up 22 points per game. It's a conference game. This is an important game for both teams. La Tech has Jeff Driscoll, the former Florida quarterback, coached by Skip Holtz, former East Carolina quarterback and head coach and South Florida head coach. But I like Monken, the coach of Southern Miss, the former offensive coordinator under Mike Gundy. I think Southern Miss has the offense and the defense to win this game outright, and I think Southern Miss gets the victory on the road in La Tech. I think it'll be close very early, but in the fourth quarter, Southern Miss pulls away and gets a 10-point victory. There's no way this game isn't high scoring. Southern Miss 55, La Tech 45. Should be a great weekend of college football. All the big rivalry games and matchups I'll cover on my radio show. I'll also cover them on Yahoo Sports Radio Network with Ken Thompson Wednesday night. Check that out at streamysr.com. You can check out my show on streamysr.com Saturday morning, 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Ken Thompson and I will be live on Yahoo Sports Radio Wednesday night, this Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 11 a.m. through 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Should be a great weekend of college football. Stay with me all season long. It's the best.